So again, good morning everyone. This short text was written by my root Lama, Khamtrula Rinpoche, who I met in '64 in Dalhousie, India. I was working in Dalhousie at a school for young incarnate lamas, which had been set up by this extraordinary woman called Frida Bedi. Her vision was that in the future, the Dharma, the Tibetan Dharma, would be taken to the West. At those days, the Tibetans had only very recently arrived in exile. So they were still very fragile. You know, they were very poor. It was very egalitarian. There was really not much high and low. Everybody was in the same situation of having left everything behind in Tibet and escaped to India. And so Frida had this vision that in the future, Tibetan Buddhism would be very relevant around the world. And so the people who would take it would be these incarnate lamas, the tukus. And so they should get prepared, ready, by learning English. But it was no good to send them to ordinary, like Catholic schools, etc., where you get a good knowledge of English, because they were the ones who were going to take the Dharma to the rest of the world. And so therefore they needed to study because they were young. So she started a school where for the four traditions, and each one had their own teacher and did their own rituals, but also the emphasis was on learning English. So any backpacker that happened to wander by in Dalhousie was snapped and put there to teach them English. So they had a variety of accents. But, many very important lamas, Chugyam Trungpa, Akung Rinpoche, Lama Sopa, Tartang Rinpoche, many started at that school. And even recently, I was in Delhi and met with the abbot of His Holiness the Dalai Lama's monastery in Dharamshala, Namgyal. And he was again saying, do you remember those days in Dalhousie? And I was such a naughty little boy. He was a very good little boy, actually. But they liked to think they were naughty. And so like this, he, again said, well, this was the foundation of my English. So it was an incredible place. And I worked there as her secretary. At that time, I was 20 years old. And then one evening, I got this letter which had this sample of Tibetan handmade paper and a letter saying, please could we find a market for this handmade paper? And it was signed Khamtrula Rinpoche. And just reading that name, faith arose. And next morning I asked Frida, who is Khamtrula Rinpoche? And she said, he's a very important Kagyu Lama. He lives not far away from here. So I said, he's Kagyu. And she said, yes, you could take refuge with him. And she said, he's the Lama who we are expecting. And we had rented a small house for him because he was coming up from where he lived, which was very hot, and coming up to the hills in Dalhousie. Dalhousie is a hill station. So we waited. This was in early May. And we waited through May, and then we waited through June, and still no sign of him. Where was he? And then on the last day of June, which was my 21st birthday, Frida got a call, and then she put the phone down. She said, okay, your best birthday present has just arrived down at the bus station. Khamtrula Rinpoche is here. So then, of course, I was very excited because, my Lama had arrived. And I ran back to the nunnery where I was staying and put on tuba, and so then by the time I got back, and then I ran to the house where he was going to stay to tell him to get it ready. And then by the time I got back, he was there. And so I had no idea if he was old, young, fat, thin, tall, short. I had no idea anything at all. I just knew this was going to be my Lama. So I went in and I prostrated and offered a kata and sat down, and I felt so shy, I couldn't even look at him. I just looked, I remember just the bottom of his robe and his brown shoes. And then Frida, baby, was explaining, oh, this is so-and-so, and she'd done da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I said to her, refuge. And she said, and she was to take refuge with you. And so Rinpoche said, of course. Like, naturally she wants to take refuge. What else would she want? And when he said, of course, in that sort of quiet, but yeah, naturally, I looked at him for the first time. And at that, two things were simultaneous. One was the sense of meeting somebody that I hadn't seen for a long time and meeting them again, like, oh, how lovely to see you again. And at the same time, as if the very deepest part of my being had suddenly taken material form in front of me. Like he had always been there, but now he was in a material form. So, I never had that experience with any other Lama, however great. And he also, from his side, always just accepted, there I was again. He said to me one time, it's a little difficult now because you have, before I could keep you very close, but now you have taken female form, so it's a little more difficult. But he kept me as his secretary, and 3 weeks after meeting him, we went back to his monastery, and that's where I received my first ordination. So when people ask about lamas, I always say check them out and don't be too precipitate, and you've got to really, investigate carefully first. But, because I didn't do any of that, so there we go. But Rinpoche really was a Buddha, so I was very fortunate. He didn't teach much as far as giving formal teachings, but his very life was his teachings. He was a very big man, more than 6 foot and heavy, but very gentle, very powerful. You felt the power there, but it was all kind of kept in, and he manifested as a very gentle emanation, very soft-spoken, very talented. He was a very esteemed artist. Often I would go to visit lamas and they would show me tankas very proudly, which had been painted by Rinpoche. He was also a poet. And he ran his community, which was not just monks, but also lay people, because when he escaped from Tibet and his lay followers in Tibet recognized he wasn't coming back, then they also started leaving and arriving and saying, well, here we are, now take care of us. And so then he started a craft community. When I say community, everyone was making very nice carpets or wood carving or painting or making paper, knitting beautiful sweaters from hand spun wool. Everybody was into supporting themselves through traditional craft work. So he was very practical, but at the same time, he was very equanimous. The most wonderful things would happen, and he would say, oh, yes. and the most awful things would happen, and he would say, oh yes. And, one had this tremendous sense of security, that no matter what happened, Rinpoche would deal with it skillfully. I'm just saying this so that you get an idea of the text. So Tibetan Buddhism is we are still associated with Rinpoche and his community. Our nunnery is about 10 minutes by car from the main monastery of Kampaga, which is Khamtrula Rinpoche's monastery. Alas, Rinpoche died. When I knew him, he was 33. But he was never 33. He was 1,033. He was never a boy. Or even a young man. He was just manifesting. But unfortunately, he died when he was 48, which was a great shock to us all. However, he came back a year later, and now the present Khamtrula Rinpoche is 37. And still the Lama, the main spiritual authority for our nunnery also. So, Tibetan Buddhism is, of course, very vast. So that, this is one of its great attractions, that there are so many methods, so many approaches. If you don't, it's like, to my mind, like a Dharma supermarket, right? You go in there and there's so many varieties of everything. Which one suits you? They don't just have one technique and that's it. They have infinite. They took everything which was still extant in India up until the 12th, 13th century and imported it into Tibet and made it their own. So therefore there are many, many approaches and so infinite number of texts. And while this is an extreme richness, it nonetheless also can be a source of confusion. Where do you start? And so therefore the Tibetans got into the habit of making kind of condensed versions, depending on their tradition, but starting where you start, and then next you do this, then you do that, then you do this, so that people had a kind of roadmap and could navigate themselves through the various practices and what is the ultimate goal. So there are many of these texts, which in Tibetan is called lamrim, meaning stages on the path, but also they have much the same approach for meditation, that to where you start and then what you do next, carrying it on with all the various problems and difficulties you're likely to meet along the path and how to deal with them. So there are some very beautiful books written on the various approaches to different kinds of meditation, some in very great detail, some in lesser detail. But this is just a very, very brief outline, mostly for, all right, I want to do a Mahamudra retreat. How do I get started? And so these are just like little handbooks, just to remind us of, what certain things which we might forget, especially attitude. So it starts by getting us motivated. Why are we going into retreat in the first place? What should be our underlying motivation? And so forth. It goes on like that. So it's basically a very, I don't think there's anything in here which you won't understand. It's very simple and practical, one might say. So, and it's short. These photos of Rinpoche on the opposite page show him in various roles. He was very famous for his skill. You might find it odd, but he was very well known for his skill on symbols. These, you might think symbols, you just go bang, 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 but in fact, it's a very subtle instrument which the Tibetans play. They don't go bang, bang, bang. And he was especially well known for his very skillful sounds which he made on the cymbals. So here he is playing his cymbals. There he is looking very saintly. He had an ushnisha on top of his head, which always fascinated people. His head didn't just go round, it had a bump. You can see it clearly in that photo. Then he was also a very skillful Lama dancer. And our monastery is well known for its Lama dancing, or cham, especially the dances for Guru Padmasambhava and Mahakala, which they perform every year. He was also an artist, as I say, and so here he is painting the statue of, actually it's of Akshobhya Buddha, which is in the main monastery in Tashijong, and drawing on a canvas. Okay. So, advice for mountain retreat. Now, first thing we have to understand, of course, is that in Tibet, the ideal for practice was to leave everything behind and go up into the mountains, like Milarepa. Milarepa is always the ideal. But rest assured, even in Tibet, very, very few people actually left everything and went up into the mountains. Some did. Our monastery itself is very famous for its yogis called Tokden. Tokdens are, they are monks. In our tradition, they are monks. But having finished their basic formal training, if they would then like to dedicate their life to practice, to meditation practice, then they are taken up from the main monastery. In Tibet, they lived in caves. In India, they have huts, or they have a Yamantaka temple. And they stay there. They stay there and they cook. I compare it to baking a cake. You have the mixture and you pour it in the container and put it in a hot oven. Now, after a while, that mixture will rise. And so we might think, oh, look, it's risen, it's cooked. But it's only half cooked. If we take it out the oven, then it will collapse into a gooey mess and be extremely unpalatable. This happens when people get some kind of insight, some kind of realization, and think that they're enlightened, and then go out presenting themselves as an enlightened master. Then it's worse than if they had never started. What we need is to stay in the oven until we are cooked all the way through. When we are cooked all the way through and we take this out the oven, then it keeps its shape. It's very delicious and very nourishing. So in this Tokden tradition of Kampaga, although the monks in retreat grow their hair and make dreadlocks, but they still keep their monastic robes until such time as it is, and you don't see them, you hardly meet them, until such time as it is considered that their realizations are stable and will not collapse and are there under all circumstances. Then they are given the white skirt of a yogi and the striped, red and white striped zen or upper robe. And at that time they're called Togden. But these Togdens of Kampaga Monastery, now in Tashijong, were famous throughout Tibet because they were genuine. As the Karmapa said, any ragamuffin who couldn't make it as a monk could grow his hair and wear robes and call himself a Togden. But, that's just, that's just playing games. The Kampaga Togdens, as he said, were known because they were so authentic. And so this is the lineage started by the third Khamtrula Rinpoche. Now we are on to the ninth Khamtrula Rinpoche. In our nunnery, we have nuns, now 7, 8 nuns, who are training some of them to become Togden Ma. And so they have been in retreat now about 9 years and will continue on for as long as is needed. They are being trained by the head yogi, the head Togden from Kampaga, who is now in his 80s. Anyway, so not everybody, when mountain retreat, even if you're only doing a weekend retreat, even if you're only doing a week, whatever, it is very helpful to take time out just to completely give all one's energy and attention to practice without any external distractions. So all of you who are able to do that in your life situation at this time should think about giving, I don't think that the length is as important as the ability to really make use of that occasion when it comes. Tibetans are very fond of having long, year-long, 3 years, 7 years, 12 years, but personally, I think it's not the length that counts. What it counts is that we make gain benefit from the time that we have, even if it's only, as I say, a few days, a week, a month, or however long we can manage, to really make use of that. And I think that especially also for people who have never practiced by themselves before, it's useful to start by doing group guided retreats. Because in a group, he's not going to talk about this because this is the Tibetan way, but in a group you get group energy, which can be very sustaining, and also you get the discipline. Because one is sitting there and then one's mind is very distracted and then one thinks, I think it would be more useful right now to go and make a cup of coffee. Then I'll come back again later. And if you're in a group retreat, you can't do that. Coffee or no coffee, you keep sitting. So it teaches discipline. It gives a kind of, if one is kind of sinking, it gives an energy, and there is guidance. If you have a good guide, they encourage and help. And if things come up, one doesn't have to wonder how to deal with these inner manifestations. There's someone you can ask. So that also saves time. When one is confident in one's practice, and when one is confident that one knows what to do, and when things come up, one will be able to deal with them, then one can think of doing things in a solitary retreat. But at the beginning, I think if one is not careful, not knowing exactly what to do and how to do it, it just wastes a lot of time. So, anyway, page 20. Precious Guru, no different from all the Buddhas, supreme light illuminating the unsurpassable path of perpetual bliss, who has the kindness to reveal in its detail to sentient beings, thinking of you, I prostrate with faith and respectfully place you as an ornament on the crown of my head. So, of course, as you all know very well, in Asia, the head is regarded as the highest part of a person. And so, therefore, visualize the guru as on a lotus sitting above one's head. Often in pictures, I'm sure in this one, this is, of course, Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion. He will have Amitabha above his head. And this is Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and he probably has the Buddha on top of his head. Anyway, it is very usual to visualize the Lama as being seated on the top of one's head. And even during the day, sometimes one is advised to, throughout the day, see the guru there so that one doesn't have that feeling of separation. I tried that, I remember in Dalhousie, I was trying that, and I was going for a walk, and they had many trees with low branches, and I felt very uncomfortable because, the poor Lama was being smashed by these branches. Or if you went through a door, one felt one had to duck, That's a very concrete type of mind. But, of course, the Lama is made of light. But still, personally, I always feel more comfortable with having the Lama in the heart because, first of all, he's safe there. And also, it reminds us that our mind and the Lama's mind is ultimately the same. It doesn't mean the conceptual thinking mind, but the deeper levels of our pure awareness, our wisdom mind. That and the Lama's wisdom mind, they say it's like water into water. There's no separation. And so this reminds us of that. In addition, if you have the Lama in your heart, which in Asia is regarded as the seat of our deeper thinking, our consciousness, then one has to be very careful, that it is a suitable place for the Lama to dwell. So one has to be more careful of one's thoughts and one's emotions, because you wouldn't invite, for example, His Holiness the Dalai Lama into a room which was all dirty with filthy underwear thrown everywhere and, last night's supper and, just full of junk. If one was inviting the Lama to one's room, one would clean it up and decorate it beautifully and make it suitable to say, please, Your Holiness, come here. So likewise, if one has the Lama in one's heart, one has to be careful that it is a suitable place for the Lama to live. So this is a good way also to remind us to be mindful of our thoughts and our emotions, and to try to keep it spacious and open and beautiful for the highest wisdom to reside there. Okay. We go backwards, don't we? 8:19. Okay. So now we start. He's trying to encourage people to recognize the importance of going on retreat and explaining why some people are, when they hear about retreats, feel so excited about the thought of it. And other people go, ooh, what a horrible thought. Different people, some people are very attracted by the idea. And others are frightened of it or not interested at all. That to them, nothing could be more boring than going on a retreat. No television, no computers, no smartphones. Oh, what do you do? Well, you look at your mind. Oh, my God. other people say, oh, how can I go? Where is there a retreat center? How can I learn about this? Why? Because those who have made contact with their pure past aspirations and virtuous karma have the excellent intelligence to direct their interest far away from worldly involvements of this life. So if in past, of course, how many of you here are actually Buddhists? Raise your hand. How many of you are not Buddhists? How many of you don't know anything about Buddhism? Okay. Anyway, as I'm sure you all know, except the one little hand, Buddhism believes that we have had infinite past lives, and likewise will be involved in infinite future lives, and that this lifetime now is so important because what we do in this lifetime, how we make use of this lifetime, will very deeply influence our future lives. So, therefore, things which happen to us are not just arbitrary. They are based on causes and conditions which we ourselves, not we ourselves, I say right now, but have created in infinite past lives. I think it's very important not to make it simplistic. The Buddha himself said that karma was understood only by a Buddha. Ordinary people couldn't understand because it is very complex with many layers and many interconnections, and through many lifetimes we have done just about everything, good, bad, and indifferent. Nobody has not. And we don't know when the results of those actions are going to come up. So it's not that, if I was a good person my last life, that necessarily things are going to go wonderfully well in this life, because in the life before, who knows? And so a lot of our actions are not very, are very neutral, but some of our actions which we might have performed are very powerful and might even recur again and again in many lifetimes, both negative actions and positive actions. So it's very complex. And as a result, bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. Because, this lifetime is just such a small part of the whole vast pattern. If the bad things happen, it doesn't mean that necessarily last life you were a bad person. But in all these infinite lifetimes, we've all done everything. And we don't know when. The causes and conditions, like all these seeds in a huge, huge, fathomless field, when the right conditions come together, they sprout up. They've lain dormant, maybe for hundreds of years. And then suddenly, when the conditions come together, up they come. And then people say, why is this happening to me? Well, because at some point we made the causes and conditions. Good conditions, bad conditions. The other thing to keep in mind is that if we met ourselves in our past life or in our future life, we wouldn't know ourselves. It doesn't mean that lifetime after lifetime you come back Jewish. Maybe next time you're going to be Palestinian, then what? Truly. Doesn't mean just because you're a male in this lifetime, you're not going to be a female next lifetime, or vice versa. Or even from a Buddhist perspective, as a human, if we have not made the causes and conditions, we might go to other states and be reborn as an animal. And animals might get reborn as humans. I mean, it's the wheel of life out there, it's churning round, and we all go up and down and all over, but we're still trapped. Even in the higher celestial realms, we are still trapped. Even in the lower realms, we are still trapped. But none of it is forever. When the causes which created that rebirth is completed, then we will change again. So it's this idea of constant impermanence and movement and change. So, if we feel really it would be wonderful to be away from all this worldly distraction, I'm not interested in that right now. I really would love to be somewhere quiet with no external entertainments, as I said, no television, no phones, no computers, no any kind of connection with the outer world, just staying very simply in a very simple room and just devoting my life in that day to practice without any need to be stimulated by outer forces. Just not interested. I just want to understand my mind. If that is attractive, if the idea of looking inwards instead of always looking outwards appeals to us, if we recognize that however much outer fame, possession, status we may attain, it is ultimately not going to bring us the inner satisfaction that we crave. Because our happiness, our unhappiness, does not actually depend on outer circumstances and other people. In actual fact, it depends on our own mind. At the moment, as the Buddha said, we have a monkey mind. In fact, a mad monkey mind is how he put it. Do you have monkeys in Israel? Because if you see monkeys in the wild, not those tame, bored monkeys in zoos, but a real monkey, then you see they spend all their time jumping around, reaching. I think the image of them reaching for fruit is a good one, because you have a fruit tree, and the monkey gets there, it takes the fruit, bites it, pushes it down, takes another fruit. I mean, within no time, all the fruit is gone, and it's just lying on the ground with one bite from it. And that is like our mind. Oh, we jump, oh, this looks good. We take that, and then we're bored, then we take something else, then we take, always looking for more and more stimulation. So this is why it's called the mad monkey mind. And also monkeys in the wild, they spend a lot of time arguing and bickering with each other and, copulating, so there'll be more little monkeys. And in general, they're very restless. And so this is like our mind, always jumping around, always looking for something new, stimulation. If something upsets us, getting into fights and then leaving that and going off somewhere else. Restless, endlessly distracted. So therefore, the first thing is to tame the monkey mind. So, if the idea of taming our mind, of settling the mind, of becoming more aware, more conscious, more present, appeals to us, then this is not just because of this lifetime. It's because we ourselves have created causes and conditions from past lives. Some people, when they sit down, just naturally can meditate. Other people have many, many problems. And it's again because some people, some people are naturally musical. Some people are naturally good at sport. Some people are naturally artistic. From a Buddhist perspective, this is because we have honed these skills in past lives. So then it's easy again. We're just coming back to what we're already familiar with. And this likewise is so with the learning how to deal with the mind, how to be skillful with the mind. And the best environment for that, because our minds are so naturally distracted, easily distracted, is to be in an environment where there are minimum distractions, except the inner distractions. We have to deal with our inner distractions, but at least we don't have to fight against the outer distractions. So, those who make contact with pure past aspirations and virtuous karma have the excellent intelligence, that's pretty bright, to direct their interest far away from worldly involvements of this life, even if it's only for a day, even only a week or a month or a year. Any time that we withdraw our fascination from external, all the sensory input, our eyes, ears, taste, touch, and smell, and focus our attention inwards, even for a short time, is extremely beneficial and shows intelligence. Remaining in solitude or in a group, but a group is also fine, as I say, especially if one has never practiced before. It's much better to be first in a group, because that group will be in silence, so they are not a distraction. You don't look at each other. Our nuns, during July and August every year, they do a silent retreat, and they take it very seriously. Most of them really very, very seriously look down. Even if one gets sick and you take it to a doctor, it's very difficult because the doctor says what's wrong, and she's, she won't speak. So if you're in a group retreat situation, even though there are others around you, one avoids eye contact and one keeps silent. And so it's just an enhancement. At the beginning especially, this can be very, very helpful. Remaining in solitude, they wish to accomplish permanent well-being for themselves and other beings. For them, here is a brief explanation of the disciplines required. This is a very short text on what you want to do if you are inclined towards doing some kind of a retreat. So first he's going to get motivation. The word of samsara, for those of you who don't know, is this endless wheel which we have outside the picture of birth and death and rebirth and re-death, endlessly cycling around and around, sometimes up, sometimes down, sometimes staying more or less the same, but again and again and again and again, all locked in this prison house of samsara. We might be in luxury cells, we might be in the dungeons, but we're all in prison. And this cycle of endless coming into being and passing away and coming back into being, not just for human beings, but for animals, insects, birds, beings living in the waters, beings seen and those unseen. There are so many realms of beings. All of us are trapped in samsara until we attain Buddhahood. So, this world of samsara is by nature suffering, like a prison or a pit of burning coals. Whether born in the higher or lower realms, one never passes beyond this condition. Because it's impermanent, because no matter what we try, we do not ever attain to really genuine happiness, inner happiness, but our happiness is often just based on pleasure, which is by itself very impermanent. It's not a genuine, safe, unchanging sense of inner joy. It's very much dependent on our sensory perceptions, meaning our eyes and ears, etc., but also the mental conditions. We are trapped and always looking for happiness, but because in our mind we still are prey to the poisons of our anger, irritation, annoyance, and greed and grasping and attachment, and jealousy and envy and pride and ego, but especially all of this founded on our essential delusion that we exist as a solitary, solid, unchanging me in the center of everything. This sense of I as being often associated, identified with our race, our country, our nationality, our gender, our profession, and so forth. All our memories, our opinions, our beliefs, and judgments, all of this as a package. At the center of it is this enduring I, which experiences and thinks and so forth. This, from a Buddhist perspective, is our fundamental unknowing. We don't see things how they really are. And so he's going to deal with this as we come later into the section on meditation. So this is why samsara is suffering, because it's so very impermanent, and we are grasping at something which ultimately doesn't exist the way we think it does. So whether born in the higher or the lower realms, one never passes beyond this condition. Perceiving it as such, do not be attached to worldly happiness or wealth, or cultivate a mind. Cultivate a mind that genuinely renounces it. So renunciation is a very important part of the Buddhist path. Of course, hopefully the exemplars of that would be the monks and the nuns, who have given up family life, they've given up relationships, they've given up status, career, money, and so forth. So they are the, exemplars of a renounced life. But it doesn't mean that as householders you have to then just give everything up and wander away. But it means that inwardly there is less fascination and interest in outer accomplishments and more interest in the growing of our inner wisdom and compassion. That now takes center stage. Of course, we have to live. You have to have a career. You have to make enough money to educate children, support the family, and look after the people you are responsible for. That's fair enough. But nonetheless, it's not a matter of just what we have, but how much we are attached to it. This is a very important point. If you heard that your house or your apartment had gone up in flames right now, somebody delivers a message, what would you miss? So, some people can be very wealthy, but very unattached to what they have, very generous, very unconcerned with their outer trappings. Other people, even though they have not that much, grasp it and hold on to it very tightly as part of who they are. So inner renunciation should be something very natural. I sometimes say it's like when we are small children, then if we have like a toy that we're especially fond of, like a teddy bear, for example. You all know teddy bears? So, you love your teddy. Your teddy is your best friend. And even though it may have lost an eye and be very scruffy and dirty from all the food you've spilled on it, it's your best friend. You love it so much. And if anybody took away that teddy, it would be like tearing out your heart. Because you're attached. But as we grow older, we lose interest in teddy bears. We take up with other things which are more interest. Teddy gets thrown in the cupboard, and if we discovered someone had taken Teddy from the cupboard, we wouldn't care. Because we have outgrown our interest in teddy bears. So genuine renunciation, to my mind, is like that. We outgrow our interest in outer trappings and possessions. We're just not so interested anymore. Yes, we have to have enough to live, to eat, to take care of our families, but beyond that, that's not what life is about. Tomorrow we could be dead. What use is all our possessions, our big houses and big cars? Not going to help us even one little iota. So, as we mature inwardly, not to do with outer age, but inner maturity, we lose interest in childish things. And just gaining for the sake of having more and more than your neighbor is considered childish things. Or like a tree, if we try to pull the leaves in the middle of summer, there's a lot of resistance. But come autumn, then the leaves of themselves fall down. They are no longer attached to the tree because the cycle of the year, now those mature leaves can fall down and there's no pain there. So I think that this is the point. We think of renunciation, I've got to give up something I really want, but we don't want it anymore. It's not so interesting. We're interested in something deeper than that, more meaningful than that. And so then it's a natural process. It just seems natural to give up things which no longer interest us so much. Do you understand? So, once we have recognized that really all the things we get just add up and add up and add up, but, it's like ends up like having a backpack full of rocks which we're carrying along, our status, our reputation, our possessions, and so forth. If we just let that go, what a relief. So, perceiving it as such, do not be attached to any worldly happiness or wealth, and cultivate a mind that genuinely renounces it. Genuinely means we've lost interest. Yes, we have to do this because we have responsibilities, but in the end, we do the best we can with the job we are in, and we do give it our best. But nonetheless, we know it's of very relative importance. And what really matters in this life is cultivating our inner wisdom. You have obtained the best type of body, one that enables you to strenuously apply yourself to means of gaining liberation. So the human body is considered to be the best kind of body, superior to an animal body, but also superior to a celestial body. Because it is considered in the heavenly realms, since everything is so pleasant, there is no incentive to go beyond that. And in the lower realms, in the hell realms, then everything is so unpleasant that we are completely occupied with our suffering and our pain and feeling sorry for ourselves. But the human birth has great potential. We have intelligence. You are all educated. You are living in a country where you are allowed to believe whatever you wish to believe. And you have the freedom of your education to read and understand whatever you want to read and understand. So this is a great privilege, and especially for women, because still in so many parts of the world, women are not educated, or they are not free to think what they want to think and do more or less what they want to do. They are still very much under the suppression of their male population. So I think Israeli women are pretty strong, and they're not going to let their men tell them all what to do. So this is considered to be incredible opportunity which doesn't come unless we have made the requisite causes and conditions. There are so many other beings in the world, and human beings comparatively are so few, and especially those in well-endowed positions who have the freedom and opportunity to practice a spiritual path. That is very rare, even today. And so he says, you have obtained the best type of body, one that enables you to strenuously apply yourself to means of gaining liberation. You have been accepted by an authentic guru and have met the essence of the Buddha's teachings. So it is assumed that people who really want to practice sincerely will find a good teacher. I think in Israel, many very authentic lamas do come here. I have heard of many, very good. They might not stay very long, but they come. And one can make a connection. It's not actually necessary to have the Lama sitting in front of you 24 hours a day. It really doesn't matter. The important thing is to make the heart connection. One time, because I lived in Lahul, and my Lama towards the end of his life was mostly in Bhutan, for about 2 or 3 years we didn't meet up. And when I finally met him again, I said to him, "Oh, Rinpoche, we haven't seen each other for such a long time." And he said, and he wasn't the kind of person to talk like that, but he said, "Haven't you realized even yet that we are never apart, even for one moment?" And that's the point. The Lama isn't something out there. The Lama is something, the deepest essence of our own being. So if we make that heart connection with someone, then whether we are actually with them or not, doesn't matter. The Tibetans have very beautiful songs called Calling on the Lama from Afar. And so it's this idea the Lama's gone somewhere, but still when you call him, you imagine him sitting in your heart, and he's there. And of course nowadays most Lamas, they have lots of books that we can read. You can get them downloaded from YouTube. It's even better than it ever was to get, kind of refills. But, I think it's important to remember that we don't need to always be part of the Lama's close circle. Sometimes that's worse. In the books it says it's better not to be too close to the Lama, because you get familiar and then you see all their faults, and then, it gets, better to be a little distant and just see them nicely. It is important to make sure that the Lama, or the teacher, not just the Lama, is authentic, which means that if we are taking a guide on the path, we need to be sure that the guide knows where they're going. And they know where they're going because they've been there. They haven't just read, Lonely Planet. They actually do know. They live there. And so, even in the Tibetan text, it says we should check up first on the reputation of the Lama, or the teacher. my Lama said, look at his disciples after maybe 20 years of being disciple. What are they like? Not just newies who are all, but they're mature disciples. How are they? And the Dalai Lama also says you should spy on your Lama. In other words, he says, as much as possible, it's not what they're like when they're sitting up on their high throne. How are they behind the scenes? How do they treat people who are of no actual benefit for the Lama? Not just their big sponsors or important people, but ordinary people who have no importance. How do they treat them? Do they ignore them, or are they kind to them, or what? Just how are they when they're not performing? And the trust, because it's all based on trust. We have to believe that the Lama knows more than we know and understands us better than we know ourselves. And that can happen in an instant. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to spend years and years with the teacher. It's just an instant acknowledgement, because they are also working on a very different level of consciousness, so which we can connect to, not their superficial conceptual thinking mind. I mean, a genuine Lama is like a transmitter, and we just have to, turn, like in the old days with the radio, right? You had to get the right channel. And then they come through loud and clear. Doesn't matter where they are, even if they've died. So, you have been accepted by an authentic guru and have met the essence of the Buddha's teachings. Reflecting on all this, be happy with your extreme good fortune. So be pleased. Oh, look, I met a teacher. Trust them, even if it's not your heart guru. Any teacher who you trust that they know what they are talking about because they themselves have practiced this path, we are able to trust them. In the Tibetan tradition especially, although they talk about the guru, actually most lamas have had many teachers. I mean, the Dalai Lama himself says he's had 25 main teachers, and he puts them all up on his tree. And many lamas, somebody I was reading about yesterday said he had had 45 teachers. And so you have your heart teacher eventually, but in between, anyone who is helpful and gives teachings, and it can be considered to be a teacher. Not your heart guru, but nonetheless one of your teachers for whom you're grateful and is showing you the next part of the path. So don't get narrow-minded, is what I'm saying. Sometimes people get very sectarian. It's the bane of Tibetan Buddhism. They get very narrow-minded. Instead of being more open, they become more narrow, and this is not good. And most lamas themselves normally are not like that. They have taken teachings from many lamas of many traditions. If they hear there is a good lama, then they go and get teachings. However, one does not know how long this vessel-like body will live. The time of death is completely uncertain, and the karmic law of cause and effect is unequivocal. Therefore, it would not be right to continue amassing wrongdoings and die without having accomplished the permanent goal. Do not let the opportunities of this precious human body go to waste. Immediately begin your practice and enter the genuine Buddha Dharma. Without interruption, maintain an intelligent state of mind that decides, I will not neglect the great responsibility of diligence under any circumstance. So basically, again, very obvious. People tend to procrastinate. Oh, well, when I retire, when the children leave home. and so forth. When I get my retirement benefits, then I will practice. But who knows? The time of death is very, very uncertain. We don't all live to be an old age. Some die very early, some die in middle, some die late. We don't know what kind of health we are going to be in. I mean, very recently, a number of our friends who were not old have contacted cancer, and some have already died. I mean, I just saw them a while ago, and now they're gone. And they were very healthy, they ate the right food, vegetarians, exercising, never smoking or drinking. You know, the exemplar of a healthy lifestyle. Gone. So we cannot guarantee how long we are going to be in this body. We don't know. It's no good saying, oh, but I'm young and healthy. That's no guarantee. So, don't procrastinate. Don't put off thinking later, when all the circumstances are right, then I will start to practice. The only time we have is right now. Even if we cannot do much, we can do something. It is very important, because otherwise the time of death we will look and say, oh, what happened? I was always intending to practice. Wait, Yama, don't come. At least, we can abstain from wrongdoing. Right? He says, it would not be right to consider, to continue amassing wrongdoings. So even if we cannot do long, complicated practices and long retreats, we can at least look at our ethical conduct and really try to live in this world harmlessly. This is a good country to practice being harmless. Not just with our actions and our speech, but in our mind. To have a mind which wishes loving kindness and compassion to all beings and doesn't wish for anyone, anywhere to suffer, especially in this country. May all beings here be well and happy. Because it starts in the mind. Our speech and our actions depend on prior intention. And prior intention is our mental faculty. If our mind is harmless, our speech and actions will be harmless. If our mind is filled with anger, aversion, aggression, then our actions and our speech will reflect that. So the basic ethics for everyone, monastic or lay, is to live in this world as harmlessly as possible. Not taking life of any being, because for each one their own life is most precious. We don't want anyone to take our life. Why should we take the life of another who holds themselves as dear as we hold ourselves? Who gave us the right to do that? To deprive another being, any being, not just humans, of their life. And then to be honest and to be careful in our sexual conduct, not to exploit others, not to create harm to others, and to be careful also with, alcohol, drugs, which tend to make our minds out of control. The important thing is to lead at least a life which is clean and pure, as much as we can. We don't lie, we don't slander, our speech is careful, kind, controlled. We can do that. You might not be able to do a 12-year retreat, but at least you can be better people. Really, all of us. We can be kind. And kind not just to the people we like or we think are part of our group, but to all beings. Because all beings are precious and want kindness and don't want to be hurt. So we train ourselves, we train our mind to, really give loving kindness to all beings, not just to our little groups. All beings. That we can do. You don't have to go into retreat to do that. During the day also, when you read the news, see the news on television, what's your reactions? Really? Just see which of the poisons is coming up as we watch or read. Anger, aversion, antagonism, hatred, greed, grasping, attachment, jealousy, envy, pride, or basic underlying ignorance. It's very fascinating. Watch a movie and see which characters, which particular poison they are embodying in this moment. Right? So many of our movies, even if they're not about aggression and anger, are about attachment and lust and so forth. I mean, very few movies actually embody wholesome states of mind. Those are boring. We want action. It's so sad. Watch it. Watch the movie and just name all the poisons. As well as naming all the, if there are any, the wholesome states of mind, when people are being kind, when people are being helpful, self-sacrificing. So, don't waste the opportunity, that's the point. Don't put it off, don't procrastinate, don't make excuses. Really, really get to the central point of what a precious human body is all about, which is to evolve inwardly. Put your unshakable trust in the excellent refuge, the three jewels. The three jewels is the Buddha, his teaching, and the community of those who have actually realized the essence of that teaching. So it's like if we are all sick, then the Buddha is the supreme physician, the supreme doctor. The Dharma is the medicine and the remedy, and then the Sangha are like the nurses who help us to take the remedy properly. So it's like that. We are trying to cure ourselves of the sickness of the three poisons. And in your kind root guru who embodies them all. So the guru is regarded as being the embodiment of the refuges because his mind is Buddha, his speech is Dharma, and his form is the Sangha, especially if he's wearing robes. So therefore he is regarded as being the embodiment of the three jewels. Whatever you do, you know best. That is the idea with the Lama, that this is why it's so important to have an authentic Lama, because an authentic teacher, because otherwise this kind of attitude of whatever you do, it's right, gives the Lama no boundaries. And so, therefore, we have to be sure that it's a genuine teacher who is only acting out of genuine wisdom and compassion to benefit his students, and is not self-deluded. There's been a lot of problems nowadays because this attitude can go either way. It's really a razor's edge. It can open up our heart completely to absolute devotion to the Guru, and if it's a genuine Guru, then the blessings will come. But at the same time, if it's someone who is only half-baked and thinks they're enlightened but they're not, then all this unquestioned adulation goes to their heads, and it can end up in a very nasty mess. So we have to be sure that this Guru really is fully cooked all the way through. And his lineage, the situation around him, the feeling that we get from interacting, the kind of people around him, are they inspiring, or, is there a lot of petty jealousy and competition and, kind of problems? We need to look, not be naive. Don't be caught by charisma. Charisma is very dangerous. Hitler was very charismatic. His people looked on him as a god, and they followed him because he was very, very magnetic. So don't be dazzled by charisma. Some of the highest teachers were extremely uncharismatic. Wandering in the bazaar, you wouldn't even notice them. And yet, they were magnificent. And others, big, shiny, fancy hats, sitting on a high throne, don't go near. So be careful. They are not pop stars. And so you don't become a groupie, okay? It's a matter of opening the heart in devotion and getting the blessings. Trungpa Rinpoche, Chögyam Trungpa, he said it's like a corridor in which there are two doors, and a genuine Guru, their door is always open. But whether our door is open or not, or closed, depends on our devotion. So if our devotion is pure and the Lama is authentic, then the blessings flow like the air. There's no obstruction. So we start by having genuine faith, in the Buddhist path, genuine faith in the three jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and the Guru, the Lama, as embodying those three jewels. And then we trust them. This is why it's so important not to make a mistake. We trust them. Whatever you do, you know best. So sometimes a Lama might do something which seems a little strange, but we trust that they know what they're doing, and that we, from our conceptual thinking mind, don't understand that. But this is why we have to be really, really sure that this is an authentic teacher. In this spirit, accept the Guru as the only one in whom you can place your hopes without hesitations. Cultivate an uncontrived, fervent devotion for the Guru, and cut off the ties of wrong views, doubts, a restless mind with too many ideas, and so forth. So in the beginning, it's very important to examine the teacher. Really be sensible. They might have many students who are very devoted, but, still be cautious. But at a certain point, where having examined from all points of view, listening to people's views who are not disciples of that Lama or Guru, of course you like to hear what people think about their own Guru, but it's not really very trustworthy. So talk to people who that's not their Guru. What is his reputation? And as I say, look at his old-time students, if he has any. How are they? Would you want to end up like that? And when it all seems good, his reputation is good with people you trust, and, the community around him seem like they've really benefited from being near this teacher, and you genuinely feel that this is someone who is really knows what he's talking about and embodies what he's talking about, then we have at a certain point to say, okay, this is it, and open ourselves towards them. And then not still carry on doubting, questioning, why is he doing this, why is he doing that? At a certain point we have to make a commitment. This is why it's very careful, very important to be careful, that we really shouldn't make a commitment too soon. The Buddha said that what I think I do, I say, and what I say I do. That kind of integrity of not saying one thing, doing something else. But openness, no secrets there. Open. So the Dalai Lama also had one meeting with Western Buddhist teachers. Somebody said to him, one very well-known Western teacher, asked His Holiness, what does one do with the discrepancy between how one is when one is giving teachings on, like a throne or so forth, and how one is in everyday life? And His Holiness looked blank. And so he repeated it. And he said, look, if there's any difference between how you are acting on a throne and how you are acting in everyday life, then you shouldn't be sitting on that throne. And I think His Holiness exemplifies this when he's sitting on his throne, even in the most, serious ceremonial, whatever. He's still himself. Even though he's very dignified, but at the same time, he's not putting on an act. And if you meet him in, ordinary circumstances, he's still there. He's not pretending to be somebody he's not. And so this is very important also, that the lamas should be, whether you meet them sitting in a high ceremonial situation or every day just drinking a cup of tea, the integrity is still there. It's the same. So this is why it's very important to be cautious. Don't get caught up in glamour. Some lamas are very glamorous. So are film stars. Would you want one of those film stars as your guru? Really, really check. And take time. I mean, the tantras say we should check the Lama up to 12 years before accepting. Well, most people don't do 12 years, but, some time, at least 12 months. Check. because the commitment is very serious once it's undertaken. You're handing not just this lifetime, but all your lifetimes into the hands of someone. So you have to be sure, we really have to be sure that they are worthy of that trust. I mean, I'm repeating it because it is so important, and especially in this day and age where there have been so many problems and scandals, that we know very clearly what we're letting ourselves in for. And in the meantime, it doesn't mean we don't practice. We can take many teachers, and they don't have to be our heart guru, right? I mean, there are many teachers out here, and we listen to them, and we practice with them, and they give us so much. It doesn't mean that we have to make that ultimate commitment to them. So it doesn't mean that we have to wait until the perfect guru comes along, and then he will go, you. It's not like that. And in fact, because now there is so much given on, in books and on the internet and with passing teachers, there is so much which we can do right now to help tame our minds so that if we do meet with a good teacher, he doesn't have to start at the beginning. It's important that if, for example, we are meeting with a famous Nobel Peace Prize, Nobel winner of, in quantum physics, he doesn't want to have to start with, like 2 and 2 makes 4. We should know all that. There's so much which we can do in the meantime to tame our mind and train our mind before we are in a position to meet with someone who can help us to transcend our mind. I mean, we don't have to make excuses. Oh, I'm waiting for the teacher. There is so much out there already which we can do by ourselves or in a group with other teachers who are not claiming to be, fully enlightened, but they know what they're talking about. So please don't hang around waiting for the perfect guru to appear. I think if we ourselves practice sincerely, we will make the causes and conditions where the likelihood of meeting with a very advanced master will happen. So please, in the meantime, just keep practicing. Since beginningless time, you have had a continuous series of rebirths in this samsaric state. All beings, not only a limited number of them, have alternately been your parents. Realize that they have been as kind to you as your present parents, but are now going the wrong way, confused and deluded, wanting happiness, but engaging in activities that bring about the opposite. Contemplate this with intense loving kindness and wish them happiness. With strong compassion, wish them freedom from suffering. Persistently generate the great undertaking of bodhicitta that includes the thought, I shall single-handedly establish them at the level of Buddhahood. As much as possible, try to eliminate self-cherishing and detrimental clinging to self-centered considerations. Through the highest intention of benefiting others, become accustomed to giving away what makes you happy and taking others' suffering upon yourself. If you cannot actually do it, just imagine it. Once you are familiar with this, learn to turn whatever you do into something beneficial for others. So, now he is dealing with motivation. why are we practicing? Well, of course, the first reason is usually because people hope that through meditation they will feel better. They've never meditated. But the hope is that we will get a more calm and clear mind, and that, in general, mindfulness and meditation is good for us. We all know now that it lowers our stress levels and our cholesterol, so it must be good. And so the first motivation for practice is that we hope it will make us feel better and make our lives easier and happier, and maybe even begin to solve some of our problems. And this is not untrue. Meditation maybe is not as simplistic as it's sometimes presented, but nonetheless, in general, if we persist, then our minds are likely to become more calm, more clear, more settled, and we will begin to feel psychologically more at ease within ourselves. So that is, so to say, the first motivation, is that it will make us feel better. But then the question comes, well, there are many questions, but one question is that merely making ourselves feel better, is that enough? If the traditional example is that of a burning house, if we ourselves escape from a burning house, but our parents or our children are still trapped in that house, then how could we feel content because we are free? We would have to take the opportunity that we are out to try to bring them out likewise. Or another example is of being sunk in a swamp, a huge swamp, and then through our efforts we managed to get on dry land. But when we look back, then all our family and friends and pets and loved ones are all still drowning. Then would we say, "Oh, sorry you're still drowning, but never mind. I made lots of efforts, and look, now I'm on dry land. So if you make lots of efforts, you also can be on dry land. Ciao." We wouldn't do that. We would say, okay, I'm on dry land, now I'm going to find something to help pull you out, because now I have some stability. I can help pull you out, so give me your hand, I'll pull you out. And then that would be the reason for being on the dry land, in order to help others also get onto dry land. Right? So, we are thinking of our parents and children and loved ones of this lifetime. We would like them also to be liberated and happy and free from suffering. But since beginningless time, in Buddhism and in Hinduism, time is seen as circular. So there's no beginning, no end. It's not linear. So in a circle, where does it start, where does it end? It just keeps going round and round. So likewise, the universe evolves, devolves. There's a period of universal darkness, and then it starts coming again, and it just keeps going round. There's no, well, what happened at the beginning? There is no beginning. That's part of our small-mindedness. We can't imagine something beginningless and endless. But in Asian thought, there is no beginning, no end, until we ourselves break out. So, since beginningless time, you have had a continuous series of rebirths in this samsaric state. Not always as humans. We get reborn as animals, as insects, in the spirit realms, in the higher realms, the lower realms, just endlessly churning around. For example, in a popular series for teaching Buddhist ethics, in all Buddhist countries, very popular, is what is called the Jataka tales, the birth tales of the Buddha before he became a Buddha. And in that, he often appears as a rabbit or a monkey or an elephant or a bird or all sorts of animal rebirths as well as human ones. He's always a male rabbit or a male monkey, but nonetheless he appears in these lower realms very altruistically, always sacrificing himself for the sake of the other animals around him and so forth. But the idea is that, because we have a human birth this time, which is very fortunate for us, doesn't mean that we're always going to be humans. So in all our beginningless, endless rebirths, we have been just about everything. And so in all those times, we have had parents. We think of parents as the family that we are connected to in this lifetime, but in fact, we have throughout endless time had endless parents. They might not have been human parents, they might have been insect parents with millions of little ones, but they were all our parents. And as parents, they looked after us. I mean, you see with animals, even wild animals, how cherishing the mother especially is to her little ones. And she will defend them with her life. Recently, a small dog had wandered into our nunnery and subsequently had a number of puppies. And she was a very small little dog, obviously a family dog. And the nuns built her a little kennel, and she was there with her puppies, and she was so small. But whoever came near while the puppies were so small, she defended them like anything. Big dogs, big humans, anybody who came, she would have given her life to defend her babies. And she was always there with them, licking them and feeding them until they were able to leave. So like that, it's not just human parents, and especially mothers, who are so caring for their young. I saw a scorpion, and on her back, it was all rubbed raw, and on the back were all these little baby scorpions. She little tiny, this big, all perfect, all riding on mummy's back. So like that, even insects take care of their little ones. The love of a mother for her child is something which the Buddha used as the example of perfect loving kindness, because she loves the child more than she loves herself. It's the one time when it's pretty selfless. The mother loves her child. And so, even if we didn't have very easy parents in this lifetime, we can still get the idea. A mother, she carries the child, a human child, in her womb for 9 months, often feeling very horrible. A lot of women have problems during pregnancy. Then she has to go through the whole birth process, which even in this day and age can endanger your life, and it's painful. And then, there you are. Think of ourselves when we were little. Actually, my mother, I have to say, my mother told me that when she saw me, she said, "That's not mine." because my older brother had been so beautiful and I was so ugly, and the nurses assured her it was the only baby born, so it had to be hers. So she kept me. But, there you are, a little baby. What do? You feed, you cry, you shit. What do babies do? They don't have witty conversation. They could care less about anybody except themselves. And the mother loves them. It's the most precious being in all the world. They keep them awake all night. But she doesn't throw it out. Exchange it for something more, a nice poodle or something. Just to think of that, all that time that we don't remember except subconsciously, how much love we got, how much caring, how much devotion. So, not just in this lifetime, but in all our endless lifetimes, in some way we have been connected with all these other beings who now are strangers to us. We don't remember, we don't have gratitude because we've forgotten. But the idea is that just as we owe a deep debt of gratitude to our mother for bringing us into the world and caring for us, likewise, we have the same gratitude to all other beings, even though we don't remember that now. At some point, they were all intimately connected with us, and we have that same debt of gratitude to help them. And so, the idea of bodhicitta is that we are not just going to practice in order to benefit ourselves, that we have this debt of gratitude for all beings, that we are going to try to gain understanding and eventually enlightenment in order to benefit all beings. Because at some point we have been intimately connected with all beings are suffering, all beings are trapped in this prison house. We have to find the key to open up the doors of the prison, not just so that we can escape, but so that all the other beings likewise can escape and be free. And so this attitude, which is called bodhicitta, bodhi means enlightenment, citta means a heart-mind. So this aspiration for enlightenment is not simply so that I can be free, but that one will be in a position to benefit all beings and help all beings to be liberated. So therefore, in the practices also, in Tibetan tradition, one visualizes all beings likewise practicing. That's one way. For example, when doing prostrations, one visualizes all the beings prostrating, our parents of this life behind us, our friends and people that we're fond of on either side, and our enemies in front. Everybody practicing together. We have the commitment to practice for the sake of others. Another way of looking at it is that we become the representative for all those beings who cannot practice, all those beings who are either in unfortunate rebirths or are in position where they are not able to practice or haven't heard about the practice. We are practicing on their behalf, like an ambassador. You know, when you go, they have meetings in the UN, then the whole country doesn't go. They send a representative. That representative is on behalf of their country. And so likewise, we are the representative. We are doing happiness on behalf of all those beings who don't know how to do it or have no opportunities to do it. We are doing it for them. And then in that way, dedicating the merit, that any merit which we have gained from that practice, to all beings, not just human beings. All beings. So our motivation, it can be very helpful. You know, if we have to do something and we're thinking, oh, I can't be bothered. And then we remember that we're not doing it for the sake of ourselves. Who cares if we can be bothered? We have made this promise to practice for the sake of all beings, so there's no question. We have to practice because this is what we made the promise to do. We're representing all beings here. If we don't do it, who will? So in this way, it enhances our purpose and our aspirations. It's a bit like, you know, if you are you thinking to become a doctor, well, you go to medical school and, you know, spend years and years and years studying. But it's not just so that if we have some, you know, illness, we can diagnose ourselves and cure ourselves. We are learning how to be a doctor in order to benefit everyone else. So our aim is not for our own personal benefit. Our aim is to be of benefit and use for all these sick people that we're going to meet. So it's like that. When we practice, it's not just in order to make ourselves feel better, but it's in order to arouse our innate wisdom, compassion, in order to be of service to the world, especially in helping others to likewise realize their own spiritual potential. So this is a very important point. It's something which is very essential. It is the main difference between the various schools of Buddhism. Those schools hold to personal liberation, and those schools which hold to universal liberation. So the Tibetan schools, along with the Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, etc., is called therefore the Great Vehicle, because we are carrying all beings along with us. And however long it takes, there's an awful lot of beings to be liberated. But no mind. However long it takes. Somebody one time asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama, it had to be a Westerner. He asked, what is the quickest, easiest way to enlightenment? And His Holiness looked at him. Then he put his head down and he wept. And then he said that, you know, he makes the vow, like Shantideva, that as long as space exists and as long as there are sentient beings to be liberated, so long may I come back again and again for the benefit of the world. It's not about fast track. It's about this commitment, looking at samsara and all the beings trapped helplessly. How to gain the insight, the wisdom to be of genuine help, however long it takes, however many lifetimes. So this vow of bodhicitta is considered to be very, very important. Anyone who wants to know more about it should read Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, The Way of the Bodhisattva, or a very beautiful book by Kuna Rinpoche, whose title I've forgotten it. But it's very beautiful praises on bodhicitta. because it's very important, because it's the crux of the matter. Our motivation, our genuine motivation. Why are we practicing? Just to enhance our own sense of well-being, or out of genuine compassion and concern and an understanding of our very deep interconnection with all beings? On our ordinary conceptual thinking mind, it seems like we're all very separate entities, little bubbles, all separate from each other. But at a much more profound level of consciousness, we are all very deeply interconnected. And so, therefore, the liberation of one has to include the liberation of all. So, in the text, he is going through this because it's like you're setting your GPS. Okay, you're setting your GPS. Enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Right? Now, having set your direction, which incidentally you do at the beginning when you are saying, I take refuge in enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Assembly, by the accumulation of positive accumulation I gathered by practicing generosity and other paramita, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So at the very beginning of the session, we set our GPS. May I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Then after that, we can drop that. We don't have to think about it continually. The car is going to go in that direction. We can look at where we are, right? I mean, for example, if you were trying to get to Jerusalem and you set your GPS for Jerusalem, but in the meantime, you're passing through other cities, you're passing through other landscapes, you're meeting people on the road, you're seeing things. I mean, so we pay attention to that because we are confident that we are set in the right direction. And so even occasionally we might do a little detour. But we know that we will always be on the main track eventually. That's where we're heading. So it's very important at the beginning of every practice session and at the beginning of every day to set our motivation, to make sure that we remember that we are here for the benefit of others, all others. There is no, I'm for the benefit of all this lot, but not that lot. They can take care of themselves. No. All beings, without exception, every single being, we are vowed to liberate. However long it takes, however many endless lifetimes it might require, no problem. Eventually, it will happen. So I think we will leave it here. It's almost 12 o'clock. And then we go on to the next section. I think there's a program here which tells us all what we should be doing. All right, so you have a lunch break. Then at 1:30, please come back, because Sunma Aileen here will deal with any questions you may have up to what we've been doing so far, right? And she's very qualified to answer any of the questions. And then after that, we start again at 3 o'clock. Okay, so bon appétit, whatever that is in Hebrew.